Yeah, there's some things that get bad as you get older, and Hallmark cards will tell you what those are. But there's a bunch of things that get better with age that haven't been given enough attention. And Becca Levy at Yale has shown that when people shift their mindset on aging from a negative to a positive, they gain 7.5 years of additional life, which is remarkable.
I'm Patrick J. McGinnis, and I coined the term FOMO. That's short for fear of missing out, and it's why some people end up following the crowd when they should be blazing a trail of their own. But if you want to achieve greatness in business and life, you've got to break free. Come on, I'll show you how. This is FOMO Sapiens, where we explore how entrepreneurial thinkers find the inspiration and the courage to build exceptional lives. Welcome back to FOMO Sapiens, the show for entrepreneurial thinkers. I'm your host, Patrick J. McGinnis, and today we have a great guest and a great topic. We're talking about aging, but reframing aging. I think we've talked about this in the past, right, with people like Steven Kotler. This notion that as you get older, it's all downhill. Just not true. And that is why we have Chip Conley here to talk about it. Chip is on a midlife mission after disrupting the hospitality industry twice. First, as the founder of Joie de Vivre Hospitality, the second largest operator of boutique hotels in the US, and then as Airbnb's head of global hospitality and strategy. Conley co-founded MEA, the Modern Elder Academy, in January 2018 in Baja California, Mexico. And it is a place where people go to think about aging, to reframe the concept of aging, and to navigate midlife with a sense of renewed purpose and possibility. I know people who've gone to this thing. They love it. He's a New York Times bestselling author, and his seventh book, Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age, is out now. And you can find his 2023 TED Talk on midlife chrysalis on the internet. So it's a really good conversation. Chip is a really insightful guy. I'd heard a lot about him, and he was introduced by our friend Nick Sonnenberg, who is a guest of the show in this season, just came on. So I was really glad to hear what he had to say and meet the legend myself. But of course, as you know, I start every interview with the same question. And so I started by asking Chip this: tell me something unexpected you learned about yourself that changed everything.
When I was 47 years old, when I was going through a very difficult time, I had an NDE. I had an allergic reaction to an antibiotic, and I died 9 times in 90 minutes. And what I learned from that experience, going to the other side and experience, that's a whole other story in terms of what it felt like being on the other side. But what I learned is that I could slow down and I could actually disrobe from the identities that aren't working for me anymore. I think a lot of us in our 20s, 30s, and 40s start trying on different clothes. There's all these wardrobes of identities and roles. And yet it's almost like we're going to the dressing room and we don't take the clothes off to put on a new identity. And I was just so overwhelmed by wearing 6 different identities and roles that I felt like I was in a straitjacket. And I had to die in order to realize I could have freedom and take off some of these identities.
When you say identities, tell us a little bit more about that. Like, what were those for you? What were those things that you were trying to uphold?
So I'd founded a boutique hotel company, one of the first in the U.S. When I was 26 years old in the mid-1980s. And it's called Joie de Vivre, and grew it into the second largest boutique hotel company in the U.S., 52 boutique hotels. One of my primary identities was being the founder and CEO of this company with 3,500 employees. And I loved it. When you have a company called Joie de Vivre, means joy of life, you better love it because the name of the company basically says joy of life. But by after running the company for 22 years, I didn't have any joy around it anymore. I started it for creativity and freedom. And by 22 years into it, I was like, oh my God, I just feel completely weighed down by all the responsibilities. And frankly, the Great Recession was going on then. So one of my identities I needed to disrobe of was being the founder and CEO of a company that I thought I would run into my 80s, but I sold it before I was 50. Another identity I had to let go of was the father of a foster son who was really troubled. And I was just basically from age 13 till about age 27, I was his dad. And he was good. He was a good kid, tough kid. Really, really grew up in a very bad family and bad environment. But in his late 20s, he went, off the charts, and I had to take a step back. I was doing everything in my power to help him, but he was in prison at that point and saying that when he got out of prison, he was going to kill me. So I had to take cover and realize that's a role or an identity that I actually have to start to step away from. I had to step away from an identity of being in a long-term relationship that everybody seemed to admire, except for it wasn't working so well. So, often it's in our midlife. My friend Brené Brown calls it the midlife unraveling. And you're in midlife. You're 48. I mean, that's classically midlife.
Tell me about it.
The U curve of happiness shows that people and their life satisfaction declines from their early 20s till about 45 to 50. Your mileage may vary. And then after 50, you get happier with each decade. And it's partly because of Brené Brown's thought that midlife is about unraveling all of the expectations and the roles and the obligations and the identities, and learning how to, you've accumulated these things, and now it's time to edit them. And so, that's what I did in my own life, such that by age 50, I felt like, whoa, I'm free. And that felt good.
Yeah, shedding all of these roles. It's interesting because, we think about the hotel company. It's like you did your thing. You had a dream and you executed upon that dream and you did really well, but just staying with the same dream may not be the right thing for everybody. I think the old narrative is like, well, the person goes out to build a company and they're really successful and they run it till they die. But of course that is like out of books and movies. It's not out of life. And that's the thing about all this is like, it's all about stories. And our mutual friend, Bruce Feiler, who's been on the show twice, who we both, love. And I think many of our listeners, just like, he's my number one guest probably ever, but his whole framing, which I found so just like very elucidating, was the fact that we all have a story we tell ourselves. And then when that story no longer makes sense, we need the next story. And our society tells a story about, quote unquote, midlife. So I'd love you to just start to frame up this convo. Like, what is the story that we are supposed to, be told? Like, what is the story our society, our culture tells us about middle of life?
Yeah. So, I'll tell you that. And let me finish my story, because I went from the bad era of my late 40s into my 50s when I was asked by the founders of Airbnb to help them be their in-house mentor to turn them into the world's most valuable hospitality company. They called me the modern elder. I didn't like that at first. I was 52. The average age in the company was 26. So I guess I was an elder, but they said a modern elder is somebody who's as curious as they are wise. So my 50s were spectacular. Loved it. And I started studying midlife. And I started to, to get to your question, I started to see like what a bad brand midlife has. Yeah. The number one word attached to midlife is crisis. And there's actually been very little research done on the midlife life stage, at least in the last 20 years. So I started becoming a geek and started doing my research, decided to create the world's first midlife wisdom school called MEA, the Modern Elder Academy. And what I learned in all of my research over the last 6 years, and it's compiled in my new book, Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age, is that midlife is seen as by society as the time when your aging catches up with you. It's like your body starts to fall apart. Your short-term memory is not as good. You feel irrelevant if you're a man or invisible if you're a woman. And of course, there's the tropes, the age-old tropes of Kevin Spacey in American Beauty. But so midlife is really not a crisis; it's a chrysalis. And midlife is an era of life where you go through a ton of transitions. As Bruce is on our faculty at MEA, so you go through a lot of transitions during this time, and yet they're normal. Menopause is normal for women. Andropause is normal for men. There's a lot of things that happen. Your parents pass away. If you have kids, you become an empty nester. There's a lot that goes on. But because we have so little in the way of a roadmap to help people understand middlescence as opposed to adolescence, we think we're getting the game of life wrong. And so midlife is really a chrysalis, because the chrysalis is the midlife for the butterfly. And the societal narrative about, midlife is just going to help get you closer to being, in decrepitude is wrong, in the sense that if you look at the societal narrative on aging, how we as humans feel after age 50, we get happier. And so what I really wanted to do with MEA, my Midlife Wisdom School, but also with my book, was to create a pro-aging message, a message that says, like, yeah, there's some things that get bad as you get older, and Hallmark cards will tell you what those are. But there's a bunch of things that get better with age that haven't been given enough attention. And Becca Levy at Yale has shown that when people shift their mindset on aging from a negative to a positive, they gain 7.5 years of additional life, which is remarkable.
Hallmark cards are bad for the environment too. So that's my view on those, and expensive. FOMO. To me, it also comes with this question. It's the reference anxiety, because you have so many people who thought, well, by the age of 50, I would have checked off the list, like career check, all the things in my personal life check, blah, 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 check. And, number one, the trajectory of our lives vis-a-vis where sort of society was 30, 40, 50 years ago, totally different now. People are not doing the same patterns. And so it may be that you focused on one thing, not another, and just there's a lot of different people work longer. But also the traditional thing is like, okay, you're just told that you're supposed to be, sort of your satisfaction or your sort of succor if you don't achieve those things is, well, think of Grandma Moses. She started painting at 80. You could do that too. So there's this that's like the only thing people tell you. But of course, we all know if you can, there's so many role models that don't get elevated of people who in their 50s, 60s, not just Grandma Moses, but people who really come into their own. And it's not just professionally, it's in so many different ways, and they reinvent themselves. So it is really incredible to me. Like, there is no advantage to not listening to this message, because guess what? Age is the one thing you can't escape. Like, you can take Ozempic, you can do anything, but age is coming at you.
Yeah. Assuming you're lucky enough to be alive.
Yeah.
So, again, the ultimate anti-aging solution is to die, and that you're no longer aging. But I think that some of the things that get better with age, a lot of people don't know them. Like, your emotional intelligence grows with age. Your spiritual curiosity grows with age. Your ability to be emotionally moderate, to not be so reactive, grows with age. Wisdom can grow with age. Our painful life lessons are the raw material for our future wisdom. But if you actually don't make sense of your lessons, you could be an unwise 70-year-old. But if you make sense of your lessons, you can be a wise 30-year-old. I want to tell you, Patrick, something I did starting at age 28, that actually is a tool that people could use to become wiser. So at age 28, I'd been running my boutique hotel company for 2 years, and I was an idiot. 28-year-old boutique hotel owner, like, what the hell am I doing? And I was limping home on, metaphorically limping home at the end of a bad week. And I was thinking, like, oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. And a friend of mine had said, like, you should just take down a journal and start just journaling. So I took a journal that was empty off the bookshelf. And instead of journaling, I wrote on the cover of the book, of the journal, my wisdom book. And I started a practice that I've been doing for 35 years now, which is to make a list on a weekend, Saturday or Sunday, of the bullet points of what I learned that week. Especially the things that were painful, whether they're personal or professional. And then how that learning will serve me in the future. So in essence, what I was doing was I was metabolizing my life experience and trying to make sense of it. I now do that. I now do an exercise quarterly, or I have been doing for a long time, quarterly with my leadership teams at Joie de Vivre and at Airbnb, and then at now MEA, the Modern Elder Academy, which is once a quarter. The leadership team sits around and says, here was my biggest lesson of the quarter. And each person says what it is, and then how it will serve them in the future. And then as a group, the team actually comes together and at the same time and says, here was our biggest team lesson of the quarter and how it will serve us in the future. What an exercise. We are living in an era where wisdom is more valuable than knowledge, because all the world's knowledge is on my damn phone. And so an AI is just accelerating knowledge. So the reality is that wisdom is the scarce resource, and how you create wisdom practices is essential. And on the MEA website, meawisdom.com, there's a free ebook that's called Why Successful Leaders Value Wisdom. Check it out. If anybody's curious about how to become wiser or how a company or a team can become wiser, it's free. It's just at the bottom header of the MEA website, meawisdom.com.
I want to drill down on that a little bit because I think it's very valuable, this idea of learning from not just our mistakes, but just our experiences. Could be that you learned something that was a success, but saying that you're going to do that and then doing it actually, in an impactful, successful way are two different things. If somebody wants to sit down this weekend and go through the practice that you've just laid out, like what would be the right steps to making that a successful experience?
Well, first of all, don't feel like you have to do it for 35 years. The fact that I've been doing it from age 28 to age 63, I've had times along the way when I wasn't doing it every week.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'd be monthly. There was probably 2 years there where I didn't do it at all. So when you feel like it's a lifelong commitment, it's easy to sort of say, I can't do that. Just do it for one weekend. Make sure you sit in a place, and you don't have to do it with a journal. You could do it with a Google Doc, but definitely do something that actually allows you to write it down. Be in a space where you're not distracted. Don't do it where your people are talking to you. And then sit down, ask yourself, what went on this week that felt like a lesson that was painful? Doesn't have to be painful, but the painful ones are often the ones that have the greatest learning attached to them. What did you learn? I mean, what mistakes did you make? What things that now feel obvious were not obvious a week ago? And make a list of those. It doesn't have to be 15 or 20 things long. It could be 3 or 4, For me, it was on average about 5 or 6 things a week. It doesn't have to be just your professional life. As you write it down, what emotions are you feeling? What like the emotions are going to help you be like the breadcrumbs for you to figure out, why you want to learn from this. It could be, let me use an example. When I was 28, this is so obvious to me now, but back in 28 was not. I had one hotel, the Loma Prieta earthquake came along in San Francisco. Nobody was coming to San Francisco. I had no money to run this hotel because we had no guests. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I had a marketing idea that was a crazy idea. I decided to run it by my leadership team. And of course, I was the owner and the CEO. So I had investors, but I was like, I had the most power in the room. But there were 2 people on my leadership team who were natural born critics. And what I did is I presented this idea, and everybody was sort of depressed because we all knew we were in trouble as a business. But instead of these guys sort of embracing it and saying, okay, let's brainstorm this, they just were critics, and they just told me and the rest of the people in the room, the leadership team, why it was a bad idea. So that idea went away, which was unfortunate. And I think the lesson I learned was, if you have an idea, especially if it's one that feels creative and clever that might come out of left field, maybe you present it to the people who you think are most going to criticize it one-on-one first before you present it to the whole group, so that they can have their fingerprints on it and they can actually maybe have some influence in the meeting. And so I now know that's a good path. So in essence, get people on board before you present it. At 28, I didn't know that. At 63, it's obvious. But so that lesson, I could have written that one lesson down and say, moving forward, I know that when I have an idea that's going to be sort of wild, I should present it to the people who might be criticizing it first. So in doing that, I accelerated my wisdom.
Yeah.
So you could do the same.
I love that because you close the loop. I mean, the exercise is great. The introspective exercise of just like thinking through these things has tremendous value. But then the next time that this situation comes up, you have a new tool in the toolkit. It kind of reminds me, like, I mean, this is, they always say that, it's funny. It's like when you go to a yoga class, if you're a yoga teacher, if you don't say to the person, like, everything you're doing on the mat, you must, you'll bring it back into your life. And that's like a rule that yoga teachers have to say that to you. They also have to say, like, you're here. The hardest part of your day is getting on the mat. Now that you're here, it'll be easy. That's like the 2 rules you have to say. But it is true. When you go back, it's like my capacity to freak out is like 80% lower because I do stuff like yoga meditation. And so you build this like capacity. And what you're saying, your advice, which I don't do this, by the way, and I will start now, at least to some degree,
Yeah.
is like you're just giving yourself a place where your wisdom is annotated, where you can always go back. And I'm sure it's very fun to read back the one you did 25 years ago.
Patrick, when I was going through the Great Recession, as a boutique hotelier, I went back to my journals from the .com bust and 9/11 because it felt sort of familiar. And I read at one point 1 whole year worth of lessons. And so that's the beauty of this exercise also is it basically creates a framework for you to go back and see what you've learned along the way. And again, when you do this with a team, it's a beautiful exercise because it forces some candor and some transparency, and wisdom is not taught, it's shared. And when I actually learn a lesson from one of my leadership team members, based upon what happened to them, I can apply it in my own life. I think we live in an era where wisdom is going to become one of the most valuable strategic competencies of great companies. And so learning to actually create individual wisdom lessons, but also collective ones is important.
FOMO. All right, so your book is called Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. So you're helping us reframe this messed up, badly branded, it's true, it's like the worst branding ever. So I got to think there's somebody out there who's listening who is like, probably just like tore their ACL skiing or something, probably is stressed out, tired, maybe the career isn't where they want to be, and they're just like, this sucks. And also, all my friends, according to LinkedIn, are successful and wonderful. And so there's probably somebody out there right now who is like not feeling super chuffed about mid-age. And so, we have the man who wrote the book right in front of us. So I want to get into, you talk about this, your book is framed up in terms of physical life, emotional life, mental life, spiritual life. Let's dig into a couple of those. Help us to, see it from your side of the table.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the person you just described, you will get over the health issue. Our health is really important. We are issued our rental vehicle, our body, upon birth. And then we put a lot of mileage on it. And the older you are, the more mileage you have. And one of the things that I really appreciate in my life is that my body no longer defines me. And I think this is particularly true for women, actually. To be in a stage where, I want to maintain my rental vehicle. I want it to live a long time, but I'm doing it for long-term maintenance and less for short-term vanity. And for a long time, there was the short-term vanity thing. And again, because women are in many ways objectified in our society, they even feel that more.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that get better with age? Arthur Brooks in his book From Strength to Strength, who profiles MEA in that book, pretty much says, talks about crystallized intelligence. So when we're young, we have fluid intelligence. We are fast and focused. But we also sort of have blinders on, and we're not nearly as good at tapping into intuition. As we get older, we move from fluid intelligence to crystallized intelligence. Crystallized intelligence is not being fast and focused. It's being systemic and holistic to connect the dots. One of the first things that Brian Chesky said to me when I became his mentor at Airbnb, he's the co-founder and CEO, is after about a month there, I was the head of global hospitality, but also the founder's in-house mentor. But he said, Chip, you're so good at seeing peripherally, not getting so focused. You can see where things are going to be 3 months from now or 6 months from now. I want you to be in charge of strategy for the company too. I was like, Brian, I'm 52. I've never worked in a tech company before. You want me to be the head of strategy for a tech company? I don't even know what UX and UI are. But what he liked about me was the fact that he said, you have four-wheel drive of your brain. You go from left brain to right brain very adeptly. And there's, in fact, a book by a guy named Dr. Gene Cohen, called The Aging Brain. And so long story short is that gets better with age. What also gets better with age is our ability to discern what we need to edit out of our lives and who. As we get older, we don't care quite as much what other people think about us. It doesn't mean we don't we hate people. It just means we don't get all wrapped up about, oh my God, what that person said 2 days ago. And it's like I'm sleepless as a result of it. We learn what's important in our lives, what we can control, and we focus on that. And we don't focus on the things that we can't control. As we get older, we actually start to figure out how to create some time affluence in our life. Now, we know about affluence. If you have money, a lot of money, you're rich. If you have a lot of time, you're wealthy. And that's, as we get older, we start to ask ourselves, what is it in our lives that is just taking time and it's wasting my time? And how do I instead bring some time affluence? Because if you have some time affluence, you actually can become a beginner again. One of my favorite questions to ask at MEA in a workshop is 10 years from now, what will you regret if you don't learn it or do it now? And the reason this is such a powerful question is because anticipated regret, thinking about the future and knowing I'll regret it, is a really great catalyst for taking action now. I asked that question at age 57 when I was living on our MEA campus in Baja on a beach in Mexico. Our second campus is in Santa Fe, New Mexico. But I was on the beach and thinking, like, I'm in Mexico. I don't even understand Spanish. I need to learn Spanish at 57. Even though, there's a bumper sticker in my head saying I'm too old to learn a foreign language. Similarly, I learned how to surf at age 57 because it was not going to be easier at 67. So creating space in our life so we can be curious and open to becoming a beginner again allows us to create a really well-curated life. And the biggest challenge of midlife and beyond is getting bored.
Yeah. There's a word in Spanish for anticipated regret. Do you know what it is?
What?
El FOMO.
Oh.
El FOMO. Arrepentimiento anticipado es el FOMO. Oh my goodness.
Excelente.
Oh my goodness. I love that. Okay, so thank you so much. I feel like you hit a lot of important points. And now it is time to move on to the last phase of our conversation, which is our lightning round. So yes. Quick and dirty or clean, whatever you want, answers to 4 questions. You ready to go?
Yep.
Go for it. Number 1, what is a favorite quote?
Oh, Henry David Thoreau, the cost of something is measured by how much life you have to give for it.
Love that. Okay, number 2.
Actually, this is why I'm not the mayor of San Francisco, because Gavin Newsom wanted me to become mayor of San Francisco, and I said no. That'll cost me my life.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, the person he did appoint actually died in office. So. Oh
God. Yeah. No. Number 2, name one book or podcast that every FOMO Sapiens should know about besides your own.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm a big fan of Rich Roll. So Rich Roll's podcast to me is humane but also it's one that's based upon the idea of pushing yourself. So I'm a big fan of his.
Number 3, what's one piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
Be yourself. Everyone else is taken.
Yeah, I like that.
That's an Oscar Wilde quote. But yeah, I think so often we spend our teen years and maybe even our 20s being so focused on, trying to fit in or be like everyone else that we lose track of our originality and our individuality.
There's a word for that in Spanish,
Yeah.
El FOMO. Okay, number 1, the final one. What's your most important memory?
I think my most important memory was when I had that NDE and I went to the other side and I saw what heaven or whatever that space is going to be like. And I saw that I was supposed to be wearing some slippers that said slow down on them.
Really?
Which is funny because I started a hotel in San Francisco called the Hotel Vitale. And we literally had slippers in that hotel with the left saying slow and the right slipper saying down. And that's what I needed to learn at age 47 and still what I need to learn at 63.
Wow. All right. If you want to find out more about Chip and his work, you can go to LinkedIn at Modern Elder Academy. You can find him on Instagram at Chip Conley, also on Facebook at the same. The book is called Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. Chip Conley, thank you so much for being here.
Patrick, and people can find us also at meawisdom.com, the Modern Elder Academy website. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. FOMO. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis, on Twitter at PJ McGinnis, and on the web at FOMOSapiens.com or PatrickMcGinnis.com, where you can get all kinds of free resources to live a more decisive and entrepreneurial life. FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me at FOMOSapiens.com and at PatrickMcGinnis.com. To advertise on FOMO Sapiens, reach out to contact@FOMOSapiens.com.